Taken from his storytelling, not from In God We Trust, the book of short stories. So that's how it all began, and that was a beginning of a 12-year sojourn. What am I talking about? Closer to 15 years to get the movie made eventually in 1983.
It out.
I want an official Red Ryder Carbine Action 200 range-ball air rifle.
The snap of a few sparks, a quick whiff of ozone, and the lamp blazed forth in unparalleled glory.
Oh, look at that! Will you look at that? Isn't that glorious?
Damn, hell, you say you want it? Yeah. Mind power, sweet, mind power.
His lips curled in a defiant sneer. There was no going back now.
This is nuts.
Before Bob Clark became the legendary director of A Christmas Story, he lived under a different set of lights. As a teenager living in South Florida, he attended Fort Lauderdale High School, where he starred in both baseball and football for the Flying L's. He was a speedy outfielder in baseball and was the starting quarterback in football, where he made his mark as one of the best all-around athletes in South Florida, even becoming the team's co-captain his senior year. Raised by a single mother, Christine, finances were always tight. When it came time for Bob's high school graduation in 1958, he decided to play for a semi-pro football team, spending 2 years with the Fort Lauderdale Knights. He excelled for the Knights, starting at quarterback and leading them in 2 conference championships.
Well, there's a lamp, you nincompoop, but it's a major award. I won it. Damn, hell, you say you won it? Yeah. Mind power, sweet, mind power.
At one of his games, a Hillsdale College scout came to watch his team play. Impressed by what he saw, Hillsdale recruiter Charlie Bachman recruited 4 players from Fort Lauderdale, one of them being Bob Clark. Hillsdale football coach Muddy Waters flew down to Florida to personally seal the deal with Clark and the other Fort Lauderdale players, offering them full ride scholarships to come play for Hillsdale. Bob Clark enrolled in the spring semester of 1960 as a 20-year-old freshman and joined the football team in the fall.
He kind of came in at a really high water moment for the football program, the early 60s under Muddy Waters. The team was incredibly strong. So I think he was a very promising player. I think he found it hard to break into the lineup given the level of talent that the team had at the time. He moved around positions a lot. So he started at quarterback. He played at halfback. He played at fullback. He went back to quarterback. He led the team in punting for a while. So he, you know, in the media guides we had from back then, they talked about him as a player in search of a position.
I think the reason why he went to Hillsdale is because it was a scholarship, and they didn't have very much money at the time, and he wanted to play football. I don't think the filmmaking thing was a thing then. And Hillsdale was a way to get out of the life that he was in.
The team had great success that year, winning the first bowl game in school history. Bob continued to make his mark as both a punter and a quarterback in the 1961 and 1962 seasons, seeing considerable playing time as both a starter and backup. Over time, Bob made a great many friends at Hillsdale, on the football team, and in the drama department, including his roommate, Jim Lucadam.
My freshman year, I lived off campus. I got here, I didn't know you were supposed to live in the dorm, so I never signed up for that. I didn't know anything about going to college. I just showed up. And so I lived in the dorm, and I thought, you know, maybe I better find a place to live because they're going to throw us out of here when school starts. So I found this place to live down on Manning Street. It was the Sosong House, and they had redone the top floor. And I think there were like 4 different rooms there for 2 each. And Bobby Clark lived in the front room. And Bob Clark was a senior when I was a freshman. And Bob Clark, I couldn't figure out why he was in that place with all freshmen or anything, but he was just putting in his last semester. And Bobby was on the football team. He played fullback. He gets back to campus, and he'd never driven on snow before. And there was about maybe 2 inches of snow on the ground. And we jumped in the car to come to dinner or something at the old Curtis Hall. And Bobby's driving. And as I said, the tires were bald. And he got into a little bit of skid and didn't know what to do and ran into the snowbank right outside the unit. Of course, everybody was up there laughing and everything. So we realized we had to do something. So we took Bobby out to Bob East Lake, and it was frozen, and they were ice fishing out there. And we taught him how to drive and how to control a skid and everything, but he had no clue how to do it.
In 1963, Bob Clark and a local girl named Mary Sasong began dating. Mary was an outstanding violinist and taught at St. Anthony's Catholic Church. Her family owned a boarding house on Manning Street in Hillsdale, and Bob rented a room on the top floor, falling in love with the girl who lived downstairs.
I think it wasn't until I was a junior, and we were in all the different English classes together, drama and writing and I don't know, all kinds of stuff, English novel, whatever. I met him through class, and we would, sometimes you end up sitting next to somebody and having conversations, and then I think I met him in class before I even knew that he was living upstairs. But anyway, that's how we met and started dating. We were both movie people. We both really liked movies. Watch them a lot. And whenever the drama department did a play, he always had some part in it. And like I said, he would write fiction, but he was never good at writing fiction stuff. But I do remember him writing poetry, and mostly he wrote plays.
He's had a story about this and a story about, and of course, we were freshmen. We loved to hear his stories.
But Bob Clark's real love was forensics and drama at Hillsdale College, which he was heavily involved in, including acting in several school plays and competing in dramatic speech competitions. He was also a prolific writer, winning awards for his work at the school. For Bob, football was the means for him to pursue his education and his passions without the financial burden. But in the fall of his senior year in 1963, things changed for Bob at Hillsdale. In a preseason game between the varsity and junior teams, he tried to leap over 2 tacklers and landed awkwardly on his head, suffering an injury that would end his football career. Bob convinced Mary to move back to South Florida with him that fall, and they got married in December of the same year. She got a job as an elementary school teacher, while Bob started trying to break into the movie business, utilizing his forever passions of writing and production. Bob and Mary went on to divorce, with Mary moving to Maine, where she would work for a school on an Indian reservation. At this time, Bob was just starting to direct his first film, a low-budget movie about a cross-dressing soldier. Bob's first feature-length film was released in 1967, titled She-Man, a comedy drama. The film wasn't a hit with critics, but received better reception over time. Eventually, Bob decided to move to Canada to establish his movie career there due to its more affordable cost of production. From there, he'd begin working on his next feature-length film, Black Christmas. The film would be released in 1974 and be a great success. The film was considered to be the first ever slasher film starring well-known actress Olivia Hussey. With the release of Black Christmas, Bob's career began to gain momentum as he began to become recognized as an unpredictable yet eclectic director. From there, Bob began working on his next big project, a sex comedy called Porky's, based on his experiences and friendships in South Florida as a young director.
20th Century Fox would like to introduce you to Pee-wee and his pals.
My brother called me up on the phone about 1 o'clock in the morning. He says, Jim, turn on the TV. He forgot we were, 3 or 4 hours different. And he says, Bobby Clark's being interviewed on the Johnny Carson show. I said, what? He says, yeah. He says, you remember Bobby Clark? My brother lived in California. And he says, yeah. He says, he's talking about some movie he made. So that's how I found out that he made the movies Porky's. And so finally, I watched the movie Porky's, and it was all those stories that he told all of us when he was here at Hillsdale.
The film garnered great success among mature audiences, giving Bob the momentum he needed to begin working on his next big project and beginning his collaboration with Gene Shepard and young commercial actor Peter Billingsley.
What would you like for Christmas?
Horrified, I heard myself blurt it out.
I want an official Red Ryder Cup and Action 2 and Jones Ball Arrow.
I first met Bob Clark in late 1982 when I auditioned for A Christmas Story, and I met him very briefly because Bob later told me I went in, I auditioned, and I didn't hear back anything. And that was kind of common back then because as a kid you go on a lot of auditions, you generally don't get the majority of auditions that you go on. And Bob called me in and sat down and he said, "Do you want to play Ralphie in A Christmas Story?" And I said, "Yes." And that's when I got the part. Many years later, Bob told me the story. He said, "Did I ever tell you the story of how you got the part?" And I said, "No, I just remembered coming in and then never hearing anything." And so they had gone on a huge journey to get this movie made, and finally Bob gets his very first chance to audition cast for the movie. After 12 years of trying to get the movie made, gets his very first casting session, and the very first boy that ever walks in to audition for Ralphie was me. And I do my audition, I leave, he turns to the room and he says, "That's the guy. That's the guy."
What is it?
I can't put my arms down.
Put your arms down when you get to school.
As far as Bob's style goes, I would say that he had I would almost compare it to like a Hal Roach style, which if you're not familiar with Hal Roach, he's the one who started the Little Rascals. So he really just wanted everybody to just be themselves. And that's really what his style was, is searching for the natural energy in the scene. And he was, I mean, I don't want to say he was exactly like laid back because he knew exactly what he wanted. That was the thing. He knew exactly what he wanted, and he would just keep going until he actually got it.
So Bob Clark's an interesting director, sort of a chameleon throughout his career, starting with sort of low-budget exploitation pictures and horror movies, including Black Christmas, which is a Christmas horror movie. And then he falls in love with Gene Shepard's work of what becomes A Christmas Story, In God We Trust, All Others Pay Cash, and sort of goes this different direction.
After hearing Gene Shepard's storytelling on the radio, Bob Clark enlisted his help in developing the script for A Christmas Story.
I was in Coral Gables, Florida. I was in the late 60s. I was just out of college. I was working in the Miami film industry. Quite a story itself. And I was driving to a date in Coral Gables, and I turned on the radio and I heard this man telling this very strange story about Indiana and something about a light pole and all that. And I got quite fascinated, and I said, "I got to hear the end of this story. I'll just drive around the block and so I can hear the end." Well, 45 minutes later, because Gene takes 45 minutes just to tell the tongue-sticking, freezing to the light pole story, I stopped and picked up my very irate date, or maybe she wasn't even there, I don't remember. But I determined at that time I've got to know more. Who is this guy? And I started looking into Shepard. I got his book, and then I determined I had to do this as a movie.
So he reached out to Gene, they got together, they wrote the script for A Christmas Story. They loved it, they took it to Hollywood, and nobody wanted to make it. And they kept trying year after year, 3 years, 5 years, 7 years, 10 years went by. And then Bob directed Porky's. And Porky's was a big hit. And so that gave Bob a little bit of heat in Hollywood, and they said, "Well, what do you want to do next?" And he said, "I want to direct A Christmas Story." And they said, no, we've passed on that. We don't want to make that movie. How about Porky's 2? So he said, "I'll tell you what, I'll do Porky's 2 if you'll also finance A Christmas Story." And that's really how the movie got made. And then later I found out that Bob, it was such a small budget, they didn't give him a lot of money. He took his entire salary and put it back into the making of the movie. So he made $0 on the film. But again, this speaks to his preparation. I didn't realize that they had been preparing and wanting to make this movie for 12 years. So the passion was so evident on set, and their preparation was so high because they had been doing it for so long.
This was Bob's baby. He just wanted to make a good movie. Darren wanted to make a good movie. Gene wanted to make a good movie. Of course you want your movie to be huge and successful, but I don't ever remember there being pressure.
I worked with a lot of directors prior to Christmas Story and working with Bob Clark, and I had done a handful of films prior to that, some fairly big movies, and there was always this sense on the set that the movie would be a hit and it would change my life, and funny enough, all those movies turned out to be flops and they all bombed. The biggest difference that I saw in Bob was I had never met a filmmaker that was more prepared, that had a vision that was so strong and stuck to it, but at the same time allowed the actors and the space, allowed the actors to make the role their own, allowed all the crew members to contribute. But I remember he had these note cards. They were probably like 5 by 7, and he had numerous note cards, and they were really for each shot that he wanted in the movie. You sometimes hear of a shot list, and some filmmakers make them, but they kind of fall apart once you get to set and the chaos ensues and they're trying to figure it out. He stuck to them, and he would have sort of a square of the frame line, and he would have the lens that he wanted. He had the information of camera height, a sense of how wide or tight that shot was, what the background was, and then certain notes of the tone and what the feeling was. So to work with somebody who was so prepared.
And one of the things I remember is just, we would always just crack each other up. I mean, me and him and Peter, we're just always having, fits of giggles and laughter, because we're little kids, we're having fun.
And he loved it. Bob was a competitive guy. Bob played football at Hillsdale. He competition was in his blood. And he liked it. And he liked to play games. And he liked to make movies. And that was, I think, his sort of adult way of playing his game, playing with his toys. Cinema became that for him. It was such a comfortable set that a lot of the actors, Darren McGavin, myself, between takes, we'd hang out on set. I might have to go do some school, but if I had any downtime, I wanted to be on the set with everybody because it was such a fun environment. So Scott Schwartz, who played Flick, was kind of a practical joker on set as well, and he loved to prank Bob, and one of his favorites was Bob would order Indian food a lot, but Bob wanted it mild because he had a sensitive stomach. So then Scott would call back the restaurant, change his order to spicy, and poor Bob would get the food, he'd take a bite and scream, "Scott!" And then Scott would say, "Gotcha." And so this was an ongoing thing. Scott would also order room service for him frequently. He would always order a steak, and poor Bob would be late at night. He'd hear knock on his hotel room door, he'd open it, and it'd be room service. He said, "I didn't order that." He said, "Well, you got a nice steak." So during the flagpole scene, it was the coldest day of shooting, and there's that shot that eventually you get to where the teacher says, "Where's Flick?" And we all say, "Flick who?" And you cut out the window and he's stuck on the flagpole. So when we did that shot, Bob said to Scott, he said, "Okay, now I'm going to put you on the flagpole. The camera's going to be way up in the classroom. It's a long lens shot way out there. When I yell action, just keep on going till I say cut." And it was freezing. I think it was 10 or 15 below zero. So he marches Scott out to the flagpole. He gets him on there. He yells action through a megaphone. Scott starts waving. And then Bob turns inside of the crew and goes, "That's lunch." And we're like, "Now?" He's like, "Right now." So we all start going to lunch. And Scott's still out on the flagpole waving. And the take is going on and on and on in 15 degree below zero weather. And finally, Bob yells cut, and Scott is shivering, and he walks out, and Scott says, "Did we get it?" And Bob said, "Did we get it? We had it 10 minutes ago. Gotcha." And that was his final payback. And that was on the last day of shooting for Scott. So Bob was great. He would track things. He was waiting to plot his revenge, and he finally got it. It kind of came out movie theaters. It did okay. It didn't do great. And then back then, a lot of movies just kind of went away because this was right at the birth of cable, the birth of home video. And it started returning a little bit, and you didn't really expect this from movies.
And that's how it became a hit. So it was just like, almost kind of like hipsterish in a way. It was like the first hipster movie. It's like, "Oh, have you seen that movie? No? You should go check it out."
And it started to find an audience, and then it was called a cult classic. which was like, all right, well, we made cult status. That's kind of cool. And people were passing VHS tapes around. And about 10 or 12 years later, it really started to get into the culture. And I'm so glad that Bob was able to witness that. And I think Bob really got the credit that he deserved for the great movie that he made. And it's so funny in life and in Hollywood, you never know.
Shocking report from Los Angeles tonight. Movie director Bob Clark, whose vision of the short stories of Gene Shepard became the modern classic A Christmas Story, has been killed by a drunk driver. Authorities say Mr. Clark and his son Ariel were driving the Pacific Coast Highway in Pacific Palisades, California, early this morning when a man with neither sobriety nor a license, driving on the wrong side of the road, crashed into them head on.
It was Easter break, spring break in California. Got a call at like a little after 6 o'clock in the morning, and got a call from his business manager's wife telling me that I needed to get to her house, turn on the news, and that's how I knew.
I saw Bob last, not long before he passed away. We had a dinner at the Cheesecake Factory, and I was able to see him, and he was at a nice moment in his life. There had really been renewed interest in remaking some of the properties that he had made. I think there was a path to making Black Christmas and Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things, and he was in a very good place. He was happy, but we certainly all miss him today.
And then to see all the success of Christmas Story, even though it wasn't about Bob, but it was about Bob.
I learned a lot from Bob Clark. So when I was probably around 17, I wanted to start to transition to a career behind the camera. And I called a lot of filmmakers that I work with, and none of the filmmakers called me back or really expressed an interest in being a mentor, except for Bob Clark.
Bob was the first guy on every genre. Porky started the teen comedy. Black Christmas is the first one that you never saw the killer in the movies. Christmas Story is the first narrated, movie that Wonder Years was based off. Children Shouldn't Play with Dead Things was, the first zombie comedy. He's pretty much started all the genres.
And Bob and I began a relationship and a real friendship as I started to come up through the business and started to work as a producer, later as a director, and he was always there for me. Bob loved to go to the Cheesecake Factory and eat. He was kind of a late night guy, so if you were going to meet Bob and want to hang out, he'd like to meet you at 9 or 10 o'clock at the Cheesecake Factory that was open late. So we'd either play golf or I'd meet him for dinner there. And there's not a project today that I do that I don't think of him and think of what some of his perspectives might be, what some of his advice might be, and he's always traveled with me.
Bob's enduring legacy has spanned generations, with families all across the United States making A Christmas Story a part of their yearly traditions. His legacy continues all the way back to his alma mater, Hillsdale College.
Every single year, it was our tradition that my older brother would wake me up at about 5 a.m. on Christmas, and we would watch the station that has A Christmas Story on 24 hours, and then the movie would end, and then my parents wouldn't be awake yet, and so we'd watch it again and again.
The movie has essentially just become an icon in our house. Like I have Christmas Story socks. We actually have a leg lamp in our parents' bedroom. It's just one of our favorite movies to watch around the Christmas season. We watch it every year.
So it was right around, I believe it was the 20th anniversary of A Christmas Story. Warner Brothers was going to do a DVD, special DVD release, and there was a big fan event that was in Southern California, and the majority of the cast came to that. I believe even Darren came, and it was such a nice outing because Bob was able to see, I think, firsthand what the response to this film was. People had lived with it. It had started to become a part of their lives, and we did a question and answer on stage. We did some press beforehand, and then Bob asked me to do the commentary track, the director's commentary for the DVD. And I said, Bob, I was just an actor in the film. He said, no, I don't want to do it alone. And this was some of the great things about Bob. Bob didn't care about his ego. He didn't need to get on and talk on, and I did this and I did that. He said, it'll be more fun. Maybe you can kind of interview me in it, and you can ask me some questions, and it'll be a much more fun way to do it. And so I sat down, and that was such a great moment.
Holy smoke, would you? Do you know what this is? This is a lamp!
It was indeed a
Isn't
lamp.
that great?
I think it's so interesting. It's very common that around Cleveland you'll find a bunch of leg lamps all around the city around the Christmas time, always in front of the windows, or a big like Ralphie like blow up of like the pajamas and everything. So it's very much heavily embedded in like art decor there, and just like in my tradition on Christmas.
So Christmas Story is interesting because it sort of took the cultural place of It's a Wonderful Life, which was sort of the Christmas movie from the 70s up until probably about the 2000s. Obviously, people still watch It's a Wonderful Life. It's still very much a part of culture, but A Christmas Story has kind of taken on that role.
And I look at movies like Christmas Story, like I think this is a true piece of all Americana classics. Like I think of other movies like Forrest Gump, Oh Brother Where Art Thou, A League of Their Own. I definitely put Christmas Story under a collection of, if you want to look at movies that completely symbolize the United States, Christmas Story is absolutely on that top 5.
When it comes to considering the enduring legacy of Bob Clark, one need look no further than the preservation of the iconic Christmas Story house located in Cleveland, Ohio. First opened to the public in 2006, A Christmas Story House and Museum stands as a carefully restored filming location as well as a living tribute to Clark's creative vision and a beacon of collective nostalgia. The exterior of the house, recognizable from the film, is the site of many memorable movie moments. Directly across from the house, where what is now the Bob Clark bench stands, is the place where Bob Clark once made a cameo in the movie. This serves as a small token to honor the director whose work is at the heart of the film, a film that continues to resonate throughout generations.
Bob was a simple guy. You didn't notice that on his movies because they were all so different. But in every movie, Bob's in one of his movies. No matter whether you actually see him or it's his voice. He is in every single one of his movies. Somehow, some shape or form, you will find Bob in one of his movies. And that was just Bob. He'll never tell you what movies he's in. He'll never point it out, but he's there. So, that's Bob.